The galaxy was silent when the Imperial fleet began to move. Billions of stars watched as the greatest armada in history turned its course toward one small blue planet, Earth. The Empire had ruled for thousands of years. World after world had fallen before their war machines. Civilizations that once dreamed of freedom now bowed their heads in chains. The Empire called itself eternal. It had crushed rebellions, destroyed kingdoms, erased entire species from history. But now their eyes were on Earth, a young world at the edge of the galaxy. They saw humans as nothing, a primitive race that had only just begun to travel the stars. To the Empire, humanity was not a threat. It was prey. Across the galaxy, other species whispered in fear. They knew the pattern well. First came the Imperial scouts, then came the demands, and finally came the fire. Once the fleet arrived, no world had ever survived. In hidden corners, alien leaders spoke of Earth. Some prayed that humanity would surrender quickly. Others hoped they would resist, though they knew it would mean death. The Empire's fleet was too powerful. It was said that no force in the galaxy could stop it. Yet in those same whispers, there was something else. A warning. The Council, an ancient group of civilizations, had long ago spoken of Earth. They had said one thing: do not provoke the humans. Do not force them to war. But the Empire did not care. They laughed at the Council's words. To them, Earth was only a resource, another jewel to place in their crown of conquest. The Armada moved like a storm. Thousands of ships formed black lines across the stars. Massive carriers carried legions of soldiers, each trained to kill without mercy. Dreadnoughts with weapons powerful enough to shatter moons surrounded the fleet like giants. At the center was the Emperor's flagship, a vessel the size of a small continent. It was said no weapon could pierce its armor. From the bridge of that ship, the Emperor himself watched the course toward Earth. He stood tall in golden armor, his eyes cold and sharp. To him, this invasion was nothing more than a demonstration. A message to the rest of the galaxy. If even Earth could not resist, then no one could. But far below, on the blue planet, humanity was not blind. They had seen the fleet gathering. They had tracked its movements across the stars. Earth had remained quiet, silent, pretending to be weak. Yet in the shadows, plans were ready. 4 years humanity had prepared. They knew the Empire would come one day. They had studied the galaxy, listened to stories, and built weapons that no other race could understand. Humanity did not seek war, but they had built for it. Still, as the Armada grew closer, the people of Earth did not speak. The world's governments made no announcement. The news channels reported nothing. To the Empire, this silence looked like fear. They believed humanity was frozen, too weak to resist. That silence gave the invaders confidence. The Imperial commanders laughed in their war rooms. They spoke of how quickly Earth would burn. They bet on how long it would take before humans begged for mercy. Yet something strange lingered. Though the humans were quiet, there was a stillness in their silence. Not weakness, but patience. The fleet crossed the outer edges of the solar system. Imperial ships scanned the planets one by one. Mars, lifeless. Jupiter, vast but empty. Saturn, silent. And then they came closer to the blue world hanging in the void. Earth. From orbit it looked fragile, a thin shell of oceans and land. The Imperial soldiers mocked it. They imagined fire raining down on cities, humans running in fear. It was always the same. But on Earth, humanity watched. Hidden deep beneath oceans, inside mountains, and far in orbit cloaked by strange energy, humanity's true strength waited. They did not rush. They did not strike. They allowed the Empire to step closer, closer still, until the noose was around their neck. For the moment, Earth was a trap waiting to be sprung. Yet the Empire saw none of it. They believed what they wanted to believe. To them, victory was already decided. In the Emperor's council chamber, his advisors bowed low and asked how he wanted the planet taken. Should it be enslaved or destroyed? The Emperor's voice was calm. He wanted Earth crushed, but he wanted some humans kept alive as trophies, proof of his endless rule. He believed he was teaching the galaxy a lesson, that resistance was meaningless. His voice echoed with pride, with arrogance, with the certainty of a conqueror who thought no one could touch him. But far away, on Earth's surface, there were those who heard his words. The humans had intercepted the broadcasts. They had listened to every threat, every insult, every plan. And they remembered the Council's warning to the galaxy. Do not force humans to war. Now that warning would be tested. In the final hours before the fleet reached orbit, the galaxy held its breath. On distant worlds, alien leaders watched through secret channels. They knew what was coming. They expected Earth to fall like all the others. Yet deep in their hearts, some hoped for something else. Some wanted the Empire to finally face fear. Some wanted to see if humanity's silence hid the truth. The stars above Earth darkened as the Armada arrived. Thousands of ships blocked the sun, casting shadows over the planet. To the people below, the sky looked like it was filled with black fire. Alarms echoed across the Imperial fleet as they prepared their weapons. Drones flew ahead, scanning cities and military bases. They reported back that Earth was undefended. No fleets. No weapons. Only silence. The Imperial commanders smiled. This would be easy. The first transmission was sent. A voice from the Emperor himself filled the skies of Earth, demanding surrender. The voice promised mercy if humanity knelt, and destruction if they refused. For long moments the planet gave no reply. The humans remained silent, watching, waiting. And then the Imperial commanders laughed. They thought the humans were afraid. They thought Earth was already broken. But they were wrong. Humanity was waiting for the perfect moment to answer. The Imperial fleet hung over Earth like a wall of steel and fire. Thousands of ships stood in formation, their weapons ready, their engines burning bright. From the surface, the sky was filled with shadows as the sunlight dimmed behind the fleet. For the people of Earth, it looked as if night had come early. On the Emperor's flagship, the commanders prepared their final demands. They had waited long enough. To them, silence was weakness. One of the generals stepped forward and opened a channel. His voice, sharp and cruel, echoed across the skies of Earth. He declared that humanity must surrender at once. He spoke of slavery, of chains, of kneeling before the throne of the Empire. He promised that those who resisted would burn. The transmission reached every city, every village, every outpost on Earth. For a moment the world was frozen. Billions of humans listened in silence. No one answered. The commanders waited. Seconds turned to minutes. Still, there was no reply. The general sneered. He turned to the Emperor and said the humans were broken, too afraid to speak. The Emperor nodded slowly, his cold eyes fixed on the blue planet below. But then something unexpected happened. A signal rose from Earth, a single transmission sent across the stars. It was not long, not complicated. It carried only one message, spoken in a calm human voice. Leave now, or you will not return. The words echoed across every channel, filling the Imperial fleet. The commanders froze. For a moment, silence spread through the Armada. Then came laughter. The generals laughed so hard they could not breathe. The soldiers in their war rooms mocked the message, calling it pathetic. To them, this was proof that humanity had no power, no courage. They believed this was the desperate cry of a dying race. But the Emperor did not laugh. His eyes narrowed. Something about the message disturbed him. It was too calm, too sure. He felt a shadow pass through his thoughts, though he quickly pushed it aside. He raised his hand and gave the order. If the humans wanted war, then war they would have. Across the fleet, weapons came online. Cannons charged with energy strong enough to tear through cities. Missile bays opened. Plasma storms gathered at the tips of the dreadnoughts. The order was simple. Fire on Earth, destroy their defenses, burn their world. The first strike was prepared. Commanders cheered, Soldiers roared, and the fleet aimed its weapons at the planet below. On Earth, humanity watched silently. Deep beneath mountains, in hidden bases, in cloaked stations above orbit, humans listened to the fleet prepare to strike. They did not panic. They did not scream. They waited. The first blast tore through the silence of space. A massive beam of energy shot toward Earth, brighter than the sun. The fleet's soldiers cheered, already picturing cities turning to ash. But as the beam moved closer to the planet, something strange happened. The blast began to bend. It twisted in the void, curving as if some unseen hand had caught it. The energy folded in on itself, swirling into nothing. Before the eyes of the entire fleet, the attack simply vanished. The soldiers went silent. The commanders blinked in shock. The Emperor's jaw tightened. Another order was given. Fire again. This time, dozens of ships fired together. Missiles, plasma storms, energy cannons, all of it streaked through space toward Earth. But again, the same thing happened. The weapons disappeared before reaching the surface, swallowed by the void. To the fleet, it was impossible. No world had ever resisted their weapons. Yet here it was, happening before their eyes. Panic began to creep through the lower ranks. Soldiers whispered in fear. Was Earth shielded by something unknown? The commanders shouted at them to stay calm, but even they felt unease. The Emperor sat silent on his throne, his mind racing. He did not understand what was happening, and that made him angry. He demanded answers, but no one could explain. On Earth, humanity remained silent. No broadcast, no warning, no explanation. Only stillness. The silence of Earth became heavier than any weapon. It pressed against the minds of the invaders, filling them with doubt. The Emperor's rage grew. He ordered the fleet to prepare for a full assault. All weapons, all firepower, unleashed at once. Across the Armada, ships aligned, engines burned hotter, targeting systems locked on Earth. The greatest storm of destruction the galaxy had ever seen was about to fall. And yet, deep inside, fear had begun to spread. The first attack had vanished. The second had failed. What if the third did as well? In their arrogance, the commanders tried to push the thought away. But the soldiers remembered the message: "Leave now, or you will not return." For the first time, those words echoed in their minds not as weakness, but as a warning. The Armada prepared to fire again, but in that moment, strange signals began to ripple through the fleet. Instruments flickered, sensors failed, communications broke apart. The commanders shouted, demanding reports, but no one knew what was happening. The signals were everywhere, invisible yet powerful. They seemed to come from the darkness itself. The Emperor rose from his throne, his eyes narrowing at the storm of static filling his screens. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. For the first time, the Empire's fleet did not feel like a hunter. It felt like prey. Humanity had spoken once, and now their silence was louder than any roar. The invasion had begun, but already the invaders felt the weight of fear. And as the fleet struggled to understand the darkness around them, Earth was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Imperial fleet was restless. The silence of Earth had unsettled even the bravest soldiers. Weapons that should have reduced continents to dust had vanished before touching the planet. The commanders shouted orders, demanded answers, and threatened their crews, but fear was spreading faster than discipline could hold it back. In the heart of the fleet, the Emperor stood on the command deck of his flagship, his golden armor gleaming in the dim light of the stars. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp with fury. He had never known defeat, never seen a world resist his will, never faced the unknown. And now a world of so-called primitives dared to challenge his empire. He demanded a new plan, a fresh strike, one that would erase any doubt. The admirals bowed and obeyed, but inside they felt the same shadow crawling through their thoughts. Each one remembered the human message, short and clear. "Leave now, or you will not return." It was too calm, too certain. It did not sound like fear. It sounded like a sentence. Across the fleet, The crews prepared for another wave of fire. Engines roared, weapons glowed, and targeting systems locked once more on the blue planet. The soldiers whispered to one another. Some mocked the humans, others prayed to their gods, but none could deny that unease was in their hearts. Then, before the order to fire could be given, something happened. A signal broke through the static that had been haunting their communications. At first it was faint, almost like a whisper. The technicians struggled to clear the noise, their hands moving quickly over the controls. Slowly, the message grew stronger until it filled every screen, every speaker, every ship across the fleet. The humans had spoken again. Their voice was calm, almost cold. "We warned you once. This is your last chance. Leave our skies, and live. Stay, and you will be erased." The message repeated once, then silence returned. The admirals froze. The crews stared at their screens. Even the Emperor felt his chest tighten. The words were not shouted in rage. They were not desperate cries of a cornered people. They were simple, final, and absolute. It was the voice of someone who knew they held the power to destroy. A murmur spread through the fleet. Soldiers began to question their mission. Some whispered that the humans had technology unknown to the galaxy. Others said Earth was cursed, that the Council's warning had been true. Fear began to grow like fire in dry grass. The commanders tried to crush it with threats, shouting that the humans were only bluffing. One general declared that if Earth had such power, they would have already used it. His voice carried through the command channels, and for a moment the soldiers steadied themselves. The Emperor, with his pride unbroken, raised his hand. His voice was iron as he ordered the fleet to fire. At that instant, the universe itself seemed to answer. Before the fleet could release its weapons, the stars around them shifted. Strange pulses of energy rippled through the void. Ships shuddered as systems flickered. Lights dimmed, engines faltered, weapons lost their charge. It was as if the very fabric of space had turned against them. Panic erupted. Pilots shouted as their controls failed. Gunners cursed as their weapons went dark. Engineers ran through corridors trying to restore power. On the Emperor's flagship, alarms blared in every chamber. The Emperor demanded answers, but his officers were speechless. Nothing like this had ever happened in the history of the Empire. Then came the final blow. Across the fleet, screens lit up with ghostly images. Dark shapes moved in the void, ships that could not be detected by radar or sensors. They were like shadows made of iron and flame. They appeared for only seconds at a time, then vanished back into the darkness. But the message was clear. Humanity was no longer hiding. The first whispers of their true power had been revealed. One by one, Imperial soldiers stared at the ghost ships and felt terror grip their hearts. They realized the humans had been watching them the entire time, waiting for the right moment. They had walked into a trap they could not see. The admirals shouted for calm. They tried to rally their crews, to tell them these were illusions, tricks of light. But no one believed them. The soldiers knew deep down this was real. And then, without warning, one of the shadow ships struck. A single flash of light cut through the void, silent but deadly. An Imperial cruiser exploded, breaking apart in seconds. Thousands of soldiers vanished into the cold darkness of space before they even knew what had happened. The fleet was silent. Shock froze them in place. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had lost a ship in battle, and they had not even seen the enemy's weapon. The Emperor's fists clenched in rage. He ordered all ships to return fire, to target the shadows, to destroy anything that moved. The Armada unleashed its fury. Beams of energy cut across the stars, missiles streaked through the void, plasma storms burned bright. The sky itself seemed to shatter under the force of their attack. But when the light faded, nothing remained. No human ships. No wreckage. Only the silent, endless dark. The Empire had fired at ghosts, and the ghosts had vanished. Then another ship fell. This time a dreadnought, armored and massive, torn apart in an instant. The screams of its crew echoed through the communication lines until static silenced them. The Empire's armada, once proud and unstoppable, now felt the cold hand of fear gripping their throats. For the first time in living memory, the Empire realized it had met an enemy it did not understand. Humanity's warning had been given. Twice. The choice was simple: leave and live, or stay and die. Yet the Emperor, blinded by pride, refused to accept it. His voice thundered across the fleet, demanding that every ship prepare for war to the last man. He promised glory, he promised victory, he promised the throne of Earth would soon be his. But his words no longer inspired courage. They sounded hollow against the silence of space and the terror in his soldiers' hearts. On Earth, the humans listened to the Emperor's rage. They watched his every move, his every order. And they waited still, silent and patient. They had given their final warning. Now the storm was ready to break. The Emperor's voice echoed like thunder through the fleet. He ordered his commanders to unleash everything on Earth. He promised them victory, promised them the glory of crushing another world. His words carried power, but the soldiers no longer felt courage. They felt fear. The silence of Earth still hung heavy over their hearts, and the ghostly shadows of the human fleet haunted their thoughts. Still, the Empire obeyed. They always obeyed. Thousands of ships moved into position. Weapons were armed. Energy hummed across the void as the fleet gathered strength for a single final strike. The admirals shouted commands, and the soldiers clung to duty, but inside, many prayed it would be enough. For a moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the order came. Fire. The greatest storm of destruction the galaxy had ever seen was unleashed in a single moment. Cannons roared, plasma storms screamed, missiles cut across the void, and beams of light brighter than suns tore through space. The Armada poured everything it had toward Earth. The sky became fire. The soldiers roared with the madness of battle, the commanders cheered, and the Emperor smiled on his throne. But the smile did not last. The storm did not touch Earth. Just as before, the weapons bent, twisted, and folded into nothing. Energy vanished like smoke in the wind. Missiles dissolved into the void. Plasma storms shattered like glass. The greatest strike of the Empire's history was erased as if it had never been fired. Silence followed. On the decks of Imperial warships, soldiers stared in disbelief. Commanders stood frozen, their words caught in their throats. The Emperor rose from his throne, his fury burning, but for the first time there was something else in his eyes: doubt. Then it happened. The shadows moved. At first there were only a few, dark shapes sliding through the void, silent and cold. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Human ships revealed themselves one by one. They were nothing like Imperial vessels. They did not shine with polished steel. They did not roar with burning engines. They moved like ghosts, cloaked in strange energy that made them blur against the stars. They seemed alive, as if space itself had given birth to them. No one in the Empire had ever seen such ships. The soldiers whispered in terror. The commanders tried to rally them, shouting that these were only illusions, but the truth was too clear. Humanity had come out of hiding. Humanity was ready to strike. The first attack was silent. A human ship appeared behind an Imperial cruiser, fired once, and vanished. The cruiser exploded into fire, broken apart in an instant. Thousands of soldiers died before they even knew they were under attack. The fleet erupted in chaos. Orders clashed as admirals shouted across broken channels. Ships turned and fired in every direction, desperate to hit something, anything. But the human vessels were too fast, too strange. They appeared and disappeared like shadows, striking with perfect aim, then vanishing again. Another cruiser fell. Then a battleship. Then two more. Fire and wreckage filled the void as the Empire's armada began to collapse. Soldiers screamed, begging for orders. Commanders cursed, trying to control the madness. The Emperor stood on his throne, his fury burning hotter with every passing second. He demanded his fleet hold their ground, but fear was stronger than his commands. Humanity was not fighting a battle. Humanity was delivering judgment. On Earth, hidden stations and command centers tracked every move of the Imperial fleet. Human commanders spoke little, their voices calm. They gave short orders, sharp and clear. Every strike was precise. Every move was planned. They had studied the Empire for years, learned its strengths, its weaknesses, its pride. And now they used that knowledge with deadly skill. Another dreadnought fell, its armor shattered, its core burning bright before vanishing into the darkness. The screams of its crew echoed across the channels until static silenced them. The Empire, once feared across the stars, now felt terror like never before. The soldiers realized the truth. The humans had given them 2 warnings. They had been offered life. But they had chosen death. The Armada tried to retreat, but something strange happened. Their warp drives failed. Engines roared and burned, but the ships did not move. It was as if the void itself had locked them in place. The humans had trapped them. There would be no escape. Panic spread through the fleet like fire. Soldiers begged for mercy. Commanders shouted that retreat was impossible. The Emperor demanded silence, but his words could not stop the fear. Then, through the broken channels, a new message came. A human voice, calm and cold, filled every ship, every deck, every heart. We warned you. You did not listen. Now you will be erased. The words cut deeper than any weapon. They carried no anger, no hatred, only finality. The soldiers felt the weight of death in those words. And then the storm began. Human ships struck from all sides. Cruisers exploded, battleships burned, carriers shattered into pieces. The void filled with fire as ship after ship was destroyed. The Empire's great armada, which had once conquered 1,000 worlds, was being wiped out in minutes. The commanders fought to hold the line, but there was no line left to hold. Every formation collapsed, every strategy failed. The humans were everywhere, unstoppable, untouchable. Soldiers screamed, commanders wept, and the Emperor himself stood in silence as he watched his fleet die before his eyes. For the first time in his reign, he understood fear. On Earth, humanity did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They struck with silence, with precision, with cold wrath. This was not war. This was extermination. The Empire had chosen to invade Earth, and in doing so they had sealed their fate. The sky burned with wreckage. The stars shone through clouds of fire. The greatest fleet in the galaxy was dying, and the humans had only just begun. The void burned with the wreckage of Imperial ships. Where once there had been a wall of steel and fire, now there was only chaos. Carriers broke apart, dreadnoughts split into pieces, cruisers scattered in flames. The soldiers of the Empire who had once believed themselves invincible now floated helplessly into the dark, their ships torn apart in seconds. And still the human fleet did not stop. They moved like shadows, cloaked and silent, striking with perfect precision. No sound, no warning, only sudden flashes of light followed by destruction. To the soldiers of the Empire it was like fighting ghosts. Every attempt to return fire failed. Every blast of energy vanished into nothing. Every missile fired into the dark found only empty space. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere. Their weapons bent reality itself, turning the battlefield into a nightmare where nothing the Empire did could succeed. The admirals shouted until their voices broke. They tried to restore order, tried to form new lines of defense, but nothing held. The fleet was unraveling too fast. Ships broke formation, crews panicked, and fear spread faster than fire. For centuries the Empire had crushed every enemy. They had never imagined defeat. But now, defeat was all they could see. On the Emperor's flagship, the throne room shook with each impact as human strikes destroyed ships all around. The Emperor's golden armor gleamed in the dim light of the failing screens. His face was carved in stone, his rage burning hotter than ever, but inside even he could feel the shadow of fear. He had ignored the Council's warning. He had ignored Earth's warning. Now his empire was bleeding in the skies above a world he had thought weak. He demanded his commanders rally the fleet. He ordered them to stand their ground. His voice roared across the channels, a storm of fury and command. But his words no longer carried the same power. Soldiers who had once killed in his name now trembled. They saw their comrades vanish into fire. They saw their ships burn in silence. They saw an enemy they could not even touch. And they knew the truth. The Emperor could not save them. Humanity had become something greater than the Empire had ever imagined. On Earth, the people watched as their hidden defenses continued to strike. Deep within mountains, oceans, and space stations, human commanders tracked every movement of the Imperial fleet. Their voices were calm, their orders short. They showed no fear, no panic. Each decision was calculated. Each strike was chosen with precision. To them, this was not revenge. It was survival. Humanity had prepared for this moment for decades, perhaps even longer. They had studied the Empire's ways. They had learned the truth about the galaxy. They had built weapons unlike any ever seen, weapons that bent light and space, weapons that turned the laws of war into tools of silence and death. And now those weapons spoke. A massive dreadnought at the edge of the fleet tried to rally nearby ships, forming a protective circle. It raised its shields and prepared to resist. For a moment, it looked as if the Empire had regained some strength. But then the human fleet moved. A group of shadow ships appeared in perfect formation, surrounding the dreadnought. In a single moment they fired. The dreadnought's shields collapsed like paper. Its armor melted under the assault. In seconds it was gone, torn apart from the inside as human weapons ripped through its core. The shock of its destruction sent waves of despair across the fleet. If a dreadnought could fall so easily, what chance did any ship have? Fear turned to panic. Crews abandoned their posts. Commanders screamed for control. But the wrath of Earth had only just begun. The human ships began striking faster, each attack more brutal than the last. They tore through carriers, ripped apart destroyers, and shattered entire squadrons in seconds. The Empire had come with thousands of ships. Now hundreds were already gone, and the rest were falling apart piece by piece. The void was filled with fire, and in that fire the Empire's pride was burning to ash. The Emperor watched in silence, his hands clenched into fists. His throne shook with every new loss. His heart burned with fury, but he could not hide the truth from himself. His fleet was dying. His empire was bleeding. And it was all because of Earth. Still he refused to accept it. He demanded more attacks, demanded his admirals sacrifice everything. But his orders sounded like madness to his soldiers. They no longer believed in his voice. They no longer believed in victory. On some ships, crews began to whisper of surrender. Others prayed for mercy. But there was no mercy. The humans had warned them twice. They had been told to leave. They had chosen to stay. Now the humans showed no hesitation, no forgiveness. They were erasing the invaders without pause, without regret. Across the galaxy, hidden watchers saw the battle unfold. Alien leaders who had once bowed to the Empire now watched in awe. They saw the Armada fall apart. They saw the humans strike with power beyond imagination. And they understood what the Council had meant long ago. Do not provoke Earth. Do not force them to war. For when humanity rose in wrath, there was no escape. Back in the battle, the Imperial fleet tried one last desperate move. The admirals gathered the remaining dreadnoughts and ordered them to charge directly at Earth. If they could not win, they would destroy the planet itself. Engines roared as the giants moved forward. Soldiers screamed their war cries, clinging to the last shred of pride. But the humans were ready. Before the dreadnoughts could even come close, the void rippled with energy. Human ships appeared all around them, dozens of shadow vessels locking onto the giants. Beams of dark light cut through the void, ripping through shields, tearing open armor. One by one the dreadnoughts exploded, their fire lighting the sky. The charge ended before it even began. The fleet broke completely. The wrath of Earth was unstoppable. In minutes, the invasion had turned to slaughter. And the humans showed no sign of stopping. The battle was lost, but the Empire refused to accept it. Across the shattered fleet, broken signals filled the channels, a storm of panic and chaos. Ships begged for orders, admirals shouted conflicting commands, and soldiers screamed in fear as fire consumed their decks. The humans struck again and again, each attack tearing away another piece of the once mighty armada. The void was littered with wreckage, a graveyard of steel drifting in silence. And yet, the Emperor still demanded victory. On the Imperial flagship, his face was carved in rage. His voice thundered across the remaining ships, demanding they regroup, demanding they fight to the last breath. He swore the wrath of the Empire would crush Earth, that retreat was forbidden, that surrender was death. But his words no longer had the same power. His soldiers had seen the truth with their own eyes. The humans could not be defeated. Their ships were ghosts, their weapons were storms, and their strikes were endless. To fight them was to walk willingly into death. The admirals argued in secret channels. Some still tried to obey, still tried to form lines and counterattacks, but most knew it was hopeless. They had never faced an enemy like this. The Empire had always been the predator. Now they were the prey, hunted without mercy. On Earth, the commanders watched with cold patience. Their screens showed the enemy fleet breaking apart, signals scattering like dust. They knew the battle was almost over, but they showed no joy, no pride. They did not celebrate. For them this was not a triumph, but a necessity. Humanity had been given no choice. They had been attacked, their survival threatened, and now the only answer was total destruction of the invaders. The silence in the command centers spoke louder than cheers ever could. Back in the battlefield, a few Imperial ships tried one last desperate tactic. They aimed their weapons at civilian targets on Earth. If they could not win against the human fleet, then perhaps they could at least strike terror into the planet itself. Beams of energy roared toward the surface, bright lines cutting through the dark. But before they could land, the human defense grid activated. Invisible shields flared around Earth, swallowing the blasts in silence. To the Empire, it was impossible. No planet had ever built such defenses. No world had ever withstood the full firepower of an invasion fleet. Yet Earth stood untouched, its people safe behind walls of light and shadow. The failure broke whatever strength the invaders had left. Crews mutinied against their commanders. Some ships tried to flee, engines burning toward the edges of the system. Others powered down, their captains refusing to fight further. And a few, mad with despair, turned their guns on each other in blind rage. The Emperor watched it all, his face twisted with fury. To him this was betrayal, weakness, cowardice. He had built his empire on fear, but now fear had turned against him. His soldiers no longer obeyed. His admirals no longer believed. And his fleet, his glorious fleet, was nothing but fire and ashes. Yet still he refused to surrender. He would rather burn in the void than kneel before Earth. He ordered the last of his loyal ships to form a circle around his flagship. They would protect him to the last man, to the last spark of energy. If the Empire was to die, it would die with him still standing. Humanity watched and understood. They could have ended it in an instant, destroyed the Emperor's ship as easily as the rest. But they did not. Not yet. Instead they tightened their net, surrounding the last Imperial stronghold, watching as the Emperor's pride became his prison. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched the fall. From hidden stations and distant worlds, leaders who had once feared the Empire now saw something greater to fear. The humans were not just survivors. They were executioners of invaders, wielders of power that bent the laws of war. If the Empire could fall in hours, then what chance did anyone else have? Whispers spread faster than light. Some called it justice. Others called it horror. But all agreed on one truth: the galaxy had changed forever. On the flagship, silence filled the throne room. The Emperor stared at the burning wrecks outside, his jaw clenched, his heart heavy with rage. He thought of the Council's warning, the message he had mocked. He thought of Earth's demand to stay away, the demand he had ignored. And now he thought of his people, millions of lives sacrificed to his pride. For the first time in his reign, doubt touched his heart. Yet even doubt could not soften his will. If he could not rule the galaxy, then he would destroy as much of it as he could. He turned to his last commanders and ordered them to prepare the Doomsday Weapon, a hidden device within the flagship itself. It was designed to tear open the fabric of space, to unleash destruction across an entire system. It was the Emperor's last card, his final attempt to prove the Empire's might. But the humans were already aware. They had tracked the weapon's energy long before it was armed. As the Emperor gave his command, the Shadow Fleet moved. Human ships appeared around the flagship, dozens of them, their weapons locked and ready. They did not fire yet. Instead, a message cut across the Imperial channels. It was a human voice, calm, steady, and cold. "You were warned," the voice said. "Leave this system or be erased." The words struck harder than any weapon. The Emperor froze, rage boiling in his chest. To be spoken to like this, to be threatened by those he had once thought weak, it was unbearable. But the voice spoke again, sharper this time. "This is your last chance." Silence followed. The Empire's fleet was broken. The Emperor's pride was shattered. And the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what choice he would make. The throne room of the Imperial flagship glowed red with warning lights. Alarms screamed across the decks as crew members scrambled to obey the Emperor's order. Deep within the ship's core, engineers unlocked sealed chambers, revealing a weapon that had never been used in battle. It was the Emperor's last weapon, a machine designed to tear apart the very fabric of space. It did not just destroy ships or planets. It unmade reality itself. Once activated, it would unleash waves of energy capable of wiping out everything within the system, human and imperial alike. The Emperor stood tall as his soldiers prepared the device. His golden armor gleamed in the flickering light. His voice boomed across the ship, declaring that if the Empire could not have victory, then it would take vengeance. His words carried a cruel pride, a final refusal to bow. His commanders looked uneasy, but none dared speak against him. They knew what the weapon meant. It was not salvation. It was the death of everyone. Still, fear of the Emperor kept their mouths shut. Outside, the humans waited. Their shadow fleet surrounded the flagship in perfect silence. Their weapons were charged, their targeting systems locked. They could end the Emperor in an instant, but they did not. Instead they watched. Their patience was cold, terrifying. They gave the Emperor the chance to choose. The human voice had spoken clear, leave or be erased. Now the galaxy watched to see if the Emperor would listen. The Emperor's hands tightened on the arms of his throne. His pride burned hotter than any fire. He could not retreat. He could not surrender. To do so would mean the end of his rule, the end of his legacy. He would rather destroy everything than admit defeat. And so he gave the final command. The engineers activated the weapon. Deep inside the flagship, the device came to life. The walls shook as energy built within its core. Lights dimmed as power flowed into the machine. The void around the ship began to ripple, as though reality itself was bending. For a brief moment, the Emperor allowed himself a smile. Soon Earth would burn. Soon the humans would know the true wrath of the Empire. But the humans were already moving. They had seen the weapon's energy flare the instant it came online. Their ships shifted into new positions, forming a perfect net around the flagship. Then they struck. Beams of dark energy lanced across the void, hitting the flagship from every direction. Shields collapsed in seconds. Armor tore apart. Explosions ripped through the decks. The flagship shook violently, fire consuming its outer hull. Still the Emperor roared for the weapon to continue charging. Still his soldiers obeyed, even as flames devoured them. But the humans were not finished. Their weapons cut deeper, slicing through the flagship's defenses with surgical precision. They were not simply trying to destroy the ship. They were targeting the weapon itself. Inside the core chamber, engineers screamed as the walls cracked. Energy leaked into the air, burning everything it touched. The weapon became unstable, its power growing wild. What had been meant to destroy Earth now threatened to tear the flagship apart from within. The Emperor realized too late. His throne shook violently as the floor split beneath him. His commanders shouted for retreat, for evacuation, but the Emperor refused to move. His pride chained him to his throne. He would not flee. He would not abandon his weapon. If he was to die, he would die in fire, still defying Earth. Outside, the humans made their final strike. Dozens of shadow ships fired at once, their beams cutting directly into the weapon's core. For a moment the void lit up with blinding light as the device imploded. A wave of energy burst outward, shaking space itself. But the humans had prepared. Their ships vanished in an instant, slipping into hidden folds of space to escape the blast. When the light faded, the Imperial flagship was gone. Nothing remained but scattered debris drifting in silence. The Emperor's last weapon had consumed him, his ship, and his pride. The Empire's greatest leader, the one who had crushed worlds and enslaved civilizations, was no more. The galaxy trembled at the news. Across countless stars, alien leaders watched in shock. The Emperor had fallen. The fleet had been destroyed. The Empire, which had ruled for centuries, had been broken in a single battle. And it was humanity who had done it. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some called it justice, others called it terror. But all agreed that Earth was no longer a small world at the edge of the galaxy. It was now the greatest power of all. On Earth, the people watched the final explosion with mixed emotions. There was no celebration, no cheering. They felt only silence, the heavy weight of what had been done. They had defended their world. They had destroyed the invaders. But they had also changed forever. They had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and the galaxy would never forget. In hidden council chambers across distant worlds, alien rulers debated in fear. Should they approach humanity with peace, or should they prepare for war? None could decide. The only truth was that Earth had become untouchable. Back in the silence of space, the Shadow Fleet regrouped. Their ships emerged from hidden folds, surrounding the wreckage of the Imperial flagship. They scanned the debris, confirming that the Emperor was gone. Then, without a word, they vanished into the void. No signal, no warning, no explanation. They simply disappeared, leaving only silence behind. The battle was over. The invasion was broken. The Empire had been shattered. And humanity had stepped into the light as something new, something far greater than anyone had ever imagined. But deep within the darkness of the galaxy, questions began to rise. Would humanity remain a guardian, striking only in defense? Or would the wrath that had destroyed the Empire one day turn on others? No one knew the answer. Not yet. And that uncertainty was the greatest fear of all. The Emperor was gone, his flagship nothing but burning fragments scattered across the stars. The battle was finished, but its echo had only just begun. Across the galaxy, news of the Empire's defeat spread like wildfire. Worlds that had once bowed in fear now raised their heads. Rulers who had once whispered in secret now spoke openly. For the first time in centuries, the iron grip of the Empire was broken, and the name on every tongue was Earth. In distant halls of power, alien councils gathered in panic. Some cheered quietly, seeing hope for freedom. Others trembled, fearing that humanity's wrath might one day fall upon them too. Questions filled the air. Who were these humans? How had they built such weapons in secret? How had they destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy in mere hours? And, most terrifying of all, what would they do next? On border worlds, Imperial governors received the news with disbelief. Many refused to accept it, thinking it was lies spread by rebels. But when no new orders came, when no new fleets arrived, when Imperial patrols failed to return, the truth became clear. The heart of the Empire was silent. The Emperor was gone. The survivors of the Armada limped through space, broken and leaderless. Some ships fled to distant colonies, abandoning their banners. Others shut down entirely, their crews surrendering to despair. Few dared to speak of what they had seen, for the memory of the human fleet haunted them. Ghost ships striking from nowhere, weapons that bent reality, defenses no empire could break. These were not stories soldiers wanted to carry. They were nightmares that would never fade. On Earth, the world was quiet. The people had watched the battle from their hidden fortresses and command stations. They had seen victory, but their hearts were heavy. They knew the galaxy now looked at them differently. Once they had been ignored, dismissed as a small planet of little importance. Now they were seen as destroyers of empires. Humanity's leaders met in secret chambers beneath the surface of Earth. They debated long into the night. Some argued for peace, to show mercy to the broken galaxy, to prove that humanity would not become another empire of fear. Others argued for strength, warning that if the galaxy saw weakness, they would strike again one day. But all agreed on one truth: humanity could never again hide in silence. The galaxy had seen their power, and there was no going back. Meanwhile, across the stars, those who had once served the Empire began to act. On slave worlds, chains were broken as guards fled. On conquered planets, rebellions rose like fire, driving out what little imperial strength remained. Civilizations that had suffered for generations now stood free for the first time. And in their freedom, they whispered a single word with both hope and dread: humans. Some saw them as liberators, destroyers of the Empire's chains. Others saw them as monsters, beings whose weapons could erase worlds. For every world freed, another lived in fear of what might come next. In hidden stations far from Earth, spies from other civilizations tried to gather knowledge. They searched for human weapons, human ships, human secrets. But what they found terrified them. Humanity's technology was not built on the same foundation as the rest of the galaxy. It was strange, unpredictable, and far beyond what others understood. Their weapons bent light, twisted space, and moved in ways no science outside Earth could explain. The more others learned, the more they feared. Back in the ruins of the Empire's capital worlds, chaos reigned. Without the Emperor, factions rose to claim power. Generals declared themselves rulers, warlords carved out territories, and noble families fought bloody battles for control. Civil war spread like fire, burning away what little remained of the once mighty empire. And through it all, the memory of Earth lingered. None dared to challenge humanity, not yet. But all wondered if Earth would remain silent, or if their fleets would one day arrive to finish what they had started. On one distant world, a council of elder leaders gathered in secret. They were ancient beings who had lived through countless wars, who had seen empires rise and fall. They spoke of the old warnings, the messages the Galactic Council had once given the Emperor. Do not invade Earth. Do not provoke humanity. For their wrath is unlike anything the stars have ever seen. The elders knew those warnings had come true. The Empire had ignored them, and it had been destroyed in a single battle. Now the elders debated what path remained. Should they seek alliance with Earth, or prepare for a war no one could win? No answer came. Only silence. On Earth itself, the Shadow Fleet returned. Their ships appeared above the planet, scarred but still whole. They carried no banners, no victory cries. They drifted silently into their hidden docks, as though they had never fought at all. The crews disembarked, their faces grim. They had saved their world, but they had also seen the cost. Millions of imperial lives had been erased. An empire had been broken. And now the galaxy feared them. In the quiet that followed, humanity looked up at the stars and knew the future would never be the same. They had won, but their victory had made them a new kind of enemy. The galaxy would not forget. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, whispers grew louder. Whispers of vengeance. Whispers of fear. Whispers of hope. Humanity had destroyed the Empire, but the echoes of their wrath were only beginning. The galaxy was no longer the same. The fall of the Empire had left a void, and voids in power never stayed empty for long. Civilizations once crushed by the Emperor's hand now rose in freedom, but with freedom came chaos. Old grudges awakened, old rivalries reignited, and wars began to spark on the edges of space. Yet through it all, one name remained on every mind: Earth. Across countless worlds, councils argued in panic. Some believed humanity would bring order, stepping in to replace the Empire with their own rule. Others feared humanity would turn into conquerors worse than the Emperor himself. And some prayed humanity would simply vanish back into silence, hiding their power once again. But deep inside, none truly believed that. Humanity could not vanish. They had shown their strength, and the galaxy would never forget it. On Earth, the leaders of humanity gathered in a hidden chamber beneath the surface. Generals, scientists, and elders sat around a long table, their faces grave. The battle had been won, but the war was not over. The Empire's remains still burned across the stars, and already new enemies were watching. The question was simple yet heavy. What should humanity do now? Some argued they must strike first, expand their reach, and ensure no one could ever threaten Earth again. Others warned that becoming conquerors would only turn the galaxy against them. Humanity had defended itself. That was enough. The debate stretched for days. No decision came easily. The Shadow Fleet remained hidden, its weapons silent, waiting for orders. Soldiers who had fought the invasion stood ready, their eyes sharp, their resolve unbroken. They had seen the terror of war, and they knew the galaxy was watching. Meanwhile, survivors of the Imperial fleet scattered across space. Some tried to rebuild under new warlords. Others swore revenge, vowing to one day return to Earth with greater strength. But most drifted hopelessly, their spirit broken, haunted by the memory of humanity's wrath. On one ruined world, a group of rebels raised a new banner. They declared themselves free from all empires, vowing to live under no rule but their own. They spoke of Earth not as a tyrant but as a warning. They told their people, if humanity rises again, do not fight them. For they are the fire that consumes invaders. Stories of the battle spread faster than light. Every child knew of the fleet that had vanished in seconds. Every soldier whispered of the weapons that bent reality. And every ruler feared the cold silence of the human voice that had said, "Leave this system, or be erased." To many, it was not just a warning. It was a prophecy. Back on Earth, the commanders studied the stars. They knew the galaxy feared them, but fear was not enough. Fear could turn into hatred, and hatred could one day unite the galaxy against them. That was the danger now. Humanity's strength had been revealed, and the question was no longer if someone would challenge them, but when. The Council on Earth began to prepare. New fleets were built in secret. New defenses rose on hidden moons and asteroids. Scientists worked day and night, pushing their technology even further. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. They had survived the Empire, but survival was only the beginning. Beyond Earth, whispers of alliance began to grow. Small civilizations, once slaves of the Empire, sent cautious messages toward Earth. They spoke of friendship, of peace, of gratitude. Some offered resources, others offered knowledge, all in the hope that humanity would protect them from the chaos of the galaxy. Humanity accepted some, ignored others, always careful. They did not seek an empire, but neither would they stand alone. Slowly, a new order began to form. It was not built on fear like the Empire. It was not built on conquest. It was built on survival, on strength, and on the unshakable truth that Earth had become untouchable. Yet not all were pleased. In the shadows of the galaxy, remnants of the old empire gathered. Warlords, admirals, and broken nobles plotted revenge. They whispered of vengeance, of new weapons, of finding the key to defeating Earth. Their numbers were small, their power weak, but their hatred burned bright. They swore the humans would pay, even if it took centuries. Humanity knew this too. Their spies brought reports their fleets monitored movements, and their commanders prepared. If the galaxy wanted another war, then Earth would be ready. The people of Earth did not celebrate their new power. They did not cheer in the streets. Instead they worked in silence, their resolve stronger than ever. They had seen how close they had come to destruction, and they knew it could happen again. They would not be weak. Not now, not ever. And so the galaxy shifted. Where once the Empire had ruled with fear, now Earth stood as a shadow, silent but unbreakable. Some called them guardians. Some called them monsters. But all agreed that humanity had become the new center of the galaxy's story. In the void above Earth, the Shadow Fleet stood watch. Their ships hung silent, their weapons hidden but ready. No banners flew, no symbols of conquest marked their hulls. They were not an empire. They were a warning. And the warning was clear. Never again would Earth bow to invaders. Never again would humanity be a target. Those who tried would find only fire and silence waiting for them. The Council's warning to the Emperor had been true. Invading Earth meant extinction. The Empire had learned it too late. The rest of the galaxy would never forget.